Tim Harkrider joins us this morning. He's Superintendent of College Station Schools. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the time.
I want to start by talking about, I don't know, what are you going to call them today? Vouchers, coupons, ESAs? What's the easiest thing to call them?
Well, you know, the governor's choice word now is school choice versus vouchers, because when they polled vouchers and ESAs, they did not poll very well. So now the newest craze is school choice.
I got you. Speaking of you and the governor, you did not mince words at a school board meeting last week as far as the numbers are concerned. Share that with our listeners.
Yes, sir. There's a lot of misinformation being put out from the governor's office as well as other legislators of how much money school districts are getting on average per student. They put out a number that's roughly $15,300 a student, and that is just blatantly false. It's nowhere near that amount. They have lumped in federal dollars as well as bond dollars. All that money's not in one pot. Federal dollars are spent on free and reduced lunch children and campuses that have a certain number of kids. And so factually, it's just incorrect. Just to put, if you took that number, we're roughly on average $10,400 a student, $150 million. If we were getting $15,300, that'd be over $214 million. So we're missing $65 million. So if they'd like to give us that, we'd be more than welcome to take it. But factually, it's an incorrect number.
Texas legislature, as always, House meets, Senate meets first. They rolled their bill out, didn't waste any time. But we did get our first look at the end of last week at the parcels, because it's more than one bill. Kind of your overview of the House version of what we're looking at.
Yeah, the Senate went through quick, which we knew. They had made that promise 2 years ago that was going to happen. The House version is a little better. I think we're kind of to the point where there's going to be some sort of voucher bill passed, and I don't have an issue with that. That's fine. I think we're kind of to the point that the governor and the rest of the team have decided, this is what parents want. There's no data metric that says that's what parents want. But if we're going to go that way, that's fine. We're just looking for a level playing field financially, what that's going to look like, as well as the standards that we're held to as a public school district. It should be the same across the board if taxpayers' money is going to follow kids. And the House's version is a little bit more cleaned up. It's not quite as much money. It's also tied a little bit to some sort of testing metric that's totally different from the Senate. And I think that's where the negotiation piece is going to come. And I think, speak just for me, College Station ISD and our board, we just want a level playing field. Parents will have choice. That we feel like they have choice now.
So how do you, when you first saw this bill, it dropped, how were you able to dive into it? This is like a homework assignment last weekend. You had to
Right.
learn about that. So how did you learn about this?
Yeah, we started, once it hit, Austin Dunson, my communications director, copied and pasted the bill into AI to give us the talking points. That came out, and then I'm a member of multiple organizations that have staffers that start dissecting and breaking it apart and giving us the information. And then that's the devil is in the details. And so as it's heard in committee, gets on the floor, and as things start to shake out, that's the most important part of the process to pay attention to, because a few detail changes could be catastrophic.
What's the biggest difference between the Senate version and the House version that you see?
Senate version is just a blanket X amount of money. The House version is a little bit more of a lottery system. In the Senate is kind of also, but there's different percentages with the House. It's 85% of funding that we get, and so it's a little less money. It's just not a flat, and then tying it to some sort of accountability metric, whether that's a STAR test or it's a norm reference test nationally. And so the Senate has none of that. The Senate is, here's $10,500, go as you may, do whatever you want to do.
Okay. And so people understand, you got a House version, Senate version, they can pass in each of their bodies, but then there'll have to be a conference committee, and that's why we're going to have to talk for a long time about this.
No doubt. This will go, I had a board member asked yesterday, how long do you think until we know? I said, it could be the end of the legislative session before this is all shaken out.
So how do Texas school administrators keep up to speed as to what's going on?
The biggest deal that we do is our membership in Texas Association of School Administrators. We're in constant communication with them. I've got a conference call every Monday, back and forth talking to each other. Ginger Carabine and I at Bryan, we talk as well. And I think it's just we get a plethora of emails that comes in. And, anything can be filed. Right now there's 862 education bills have been filed. They don't mean anything until they get heard on that floor. And so that's when we started a legislative email chain that we sent out. Austin sent out our first version yesterday. So any of our community members that are interested, they can contact us. We'll sign them up on our email chain, and it's just factual. It's none of our opinions. We can't politic from that standpoint, but I think it's important for those that care of the bills that are being heard, what's being talked about, and potentially how it could affect us in College Station ISD.
Tim Harkrider, the superintendent of College Station, with us, and talking to one of our state reps last week, and you referenced it here. There is a change in the STAR test, and so tell me what that looks like. And yet you're thinking this may be where the wiggle room is, where the negotiation may be?
Yeah, House Bill 4, the House filed as well, and it's tweaking. We test above and beyond what the federal government requires us to. So we could reduce the number of tests. I believe on the federal level it's every other year, so we wouldn't have to test as much. To me, it's great for our kids. In the environment we're testing them every year from third grade until they graduate from high school, I think is overkill. We've got other metrics that we judge kids, the growth of kids, so it doesn't have to be every year. That's also a significant cost savings to the state. We spend millions and millions of dollars a year on the testing aspect. But I do not like House Bill 4 from a standpoint of it's giving a lot more authority to the Commissioner of Education and decisions with testing. I believe that office has too much power now, and we don't have the voice. And so any metric that the Commissioner gets more authority in law, I think for us is problematic because there's not a voice for us. There's one person making the decisions for 5.5 million school children.
Well, let's take a sidetrack now on that. We have a new administration in Washington who is, I think, saying about the same thing about the Department of Education. So as an administrator of a single school district in a single state, what are your thoughts about, or what do you see out of the new administration on the federal level?
Yeah, taking the Department Ed away, I'm not necessarily concerned about that. However, giving the money to states to disperse to us, I've got some significant concerns. If there's not a metric or funding formula that we're going to give you money as a state of Texas, you're required to give a percentage of our free and reduced lunch children X amount of dollars. If that money's just given to the state, we've received no new funding since 2019. So I think our trust in that process would be very concerning. But I think what's missing right now for us, even at the state level, is local control. Used to a local school board had really control over what took place in their boundaries. And right now, everything seems to be state mandated. It's put in law. You can't mandate student success. And I think right now, as a local school district, our school board here in College Station does not have near the control of the happenings that they did 20 years ago.
People want the consumer, the parent, wants to have some sort of an easy way to measure their school district or their campus against others. So we have a letter grade system. Is that a good thing? Does that need to be changed? What is a fair way for your school district to be represented so that the parents can understand where you stand?
Yeah, I think the metric of everything that goes into our accountability rating when they roll this out is, hey, we're going to do A through F because it's simple. And it is. A through F, everybody knows what that means. Yet I have to buy a computer program for our school district to put all of our data from STAR testing in to tell me what our rating may or may not be. So it's not a simple formula. It is very convoluted. Used to, when I was an elementary principal, I could get our tax scores back. I could have a piece of paper and a calculator, and I could calculate my rating in about 30 minutes. Now, like I said, I've got to buy a computer program to do it. So the simplified A through F, I don't agree with. I would like a holistic approach that we evaluate all components of our school district, our fine arts programs, our athletic programs, CTE programs, everything, because we do educate the entire child. We have opportunities from kids from A to Z of anything that they want to be a part of, but we're only graded on one STAR test on one day of the year, and it doesn't paint the full picture, I think, of what we do, good or bad. You know, if a rating was an A, a B, great, whatever. But we do so much more that I don't think we get credit for on the ratings, and I think, our local community should have input on our accountability rating.
Let's talk about the challenges. I think we've done enough of that. Let's talk about the other challenges that you have day to day. Behind property taxes, teacher pay is the most important thing as far as Texans are concerned. Educators earn anywhere from $44,000 to $80,000 on average, but that has to do with experience, that has to do with years on the job and what special teachers you might have. A district that attracts and retains teachers with more experience, for example, is going to have a higher wage.
Right.
You have a challenge holding on to those teachers, those most valuable teachers, because they may be able to go to surrounding districts to do that. What are you seeing as far as that's concerned? And tell us a little bit about your retention rate.
Yeah, our retention rate, we have a new CFO, Ms. Heather Wilson. She came in and did our presentation on budget starting last summer. Our retention rate is the second highest in this entire area that includes Montgomery County and like-minded districts. We're around 18.3%, which is 82% of our folks are back, and I think Montgomery was 18.2%, so a tenth of a point off, and it's a big number. It's good. She had never seen numbers that high as far as retention goes, and I think we're in a unique space that folks in the Brazos Valley area want to be a part of College Station ISD, which is wonderful because we'd love to have them. I mean, doors are always open. We're always looking for great teachers. The salary piece is interesting because the last session when we received new money back in 19, it was mandated of how much of the new money had to go to raises, and that goes back to the local control that I was talking to you about. A couple of the Senate's version right now of teacher pay, it's got percentages that have to go in, and a lot to do with merit pay on teachers producing in the classroom. And that's where the local control I have a problem with. If you want to give us new money, it's my job and my school board's job to take care of our employees. If we do a poor job of that, they're going to leave and go work somewhere else. And so you're kind of eliminating the competition aspect of what we should do that we feel like is best for our teachers here. And I think that's been the frustrating part of the money that comes in. If it's new, there's strings attached. And once again, we don't have a decision. This is what we have to do versus we had new money and I wanted to give a 5% raise. Fine. If I wanted to give a 2% raise, we'd use the funds how we felt like was best for our community.
Average daily attendance, ADA, is something that's very important to you. Because of COVID, any other number of reasons, there's charter schools, there's private schools, there's homeschooling. What does your enrollment look like in CSISD, number one? And then number two, should funding for your school and all schools be tied to ADA or some other metric?
Yes, sir. We have roughly around 14,300 students, and our enrollment growth is really kind of flat. We're a little less than 1% growth. The next 3 years, it kind of tracks around that 1% number. And we're funded on, like you said, ADA. Since COVID across the state, percentages have dropped roughly about 3% on average. We're about 2% below where we were. We are better this year through the first semester than we have been since COVID, which is exciting because it generates obviously more money. But more important than that, kids are in school with us. They're improving academically. But we have to staff our campuses as if 100% of our kids are coming to school every day. That doesn't happen. Maybe, I don't even think the first day of school everybody's there. So we, in my opinion, should be funded on enrollment because that's how I have to staff. And, you know, if 100% of my kids are roughly on average right now, we're about 95.5%. So 4.5% of our kids aren't coming to school a day, but my staff's there as if they're going to be there. And I think for us as a school district, that'd be $2.3 million more if we were funded on enrollment versus ADA, and that would be new monies.
Is that a weekly census? How do you do that?
We turn that in every 6 weeks. Okay. Every 6 weeks we turn in reports. We're responsible for the coding aspect, and so we send those reports in to the state. And then over the course of the year, there's a settle-up period. Charter schools are funded on, talking about leveling the playing field, are funded on enrollment. They're not funded on ADA. So our complaint has always been the rules aren't the same. You know, why? The Commissioner of Ed said recently in an interview that if it was tied to enrollment and not ADA, we wouldn't care if kids come to school. He obviously doesn't understand why we're in the business. We care about our kids. We care about our families. We do, truancy efforts to get families there. How can we help? We want our kids, all it does is help our community. It helps better, their future. But the enrollment versus ADA is a pretty significant number that we have to put out whether kids come to school or not.
Let's talk about your student population. Texas is a border state. We're not a border school district, but tell me about the impact of possibly undocumented or new people who have moved into the area who have challenges of not coming up in your school system where there might be language situations.
Right.
What kind of impact do we have in College Station?
Yeah, we have about a little over 30% of our students are Hispanic, and there is not a metric for the undocumented potential students that we may have when they register for school to us. That's not part of the required registration process with the state, so we're not aware. As that population has grown across the state, our communications are in both languages. And just because we want to engage those parents as well as our parents that are English speakers. We're very diverse student population here with the university here, and we mirror, in my opinion, what our society is. We're a little over, right at 60% white, a little over 10% African American, and then our multiple other nationalities are closer to 10%, which is unique. I haven't worked in a district like that. A lot of that's because of the university. So we've got a very diverse population of kids, and like I said, we have to meet their needs, and there are a variety of needs and challenges for us every day.
But teachers know if that child has come here unaccompanied or is living with someone that's not a birth parent, they know over time. Is there some safety net, something that happens in your school district that helps when you identify, even though you don't have to have an official metric for it?
Yeah, I think our teachers, counselors, staff members, nurses, we're here to support families. Christy's Closet is a great organization that we support our families in need. Once a week, they can come by and get toiletry items, clothing items. And so that's probably one of the biggest safety nets, is to provide the basic necessities and needs of our students as well as our families. And it's huge. The outreach is outstanding, and the support that we get to keep that thing up and running is wonderful.
As people look at options that they have other than public school, what is this school district doing to explain the value that you bring to a kid who comes through your system?
Yeah, I think really, Scott, telling our story. I was had a saying a while back I'd heard: if you don't tell your story, somebody else will, and it won't be an accurate story. So us trying to tell our story. Austin Dunson, our communications director, has done a great job. We have a new person, community engagement position, Krista Thompson, that's doing a great job. Ezra is our videographer who is telling our story, and I think really getting out and telling the successes of our kids and our teachers. And I think from that standpoint, if we're telling that story and getting stories out about our students, our staff members, and awards that they're winning, I mean, that's weekly. We're putting these things out. We feel like we've got a great product. But in the end, parents have options. We have some private schools in the area that are great. They do wonderful work. Ginger and Brian does great work. I think our community is blessed because you've got great educational opportunities here. But from a public school standpoint, we just want a level playing field. And, what is that going to look like? I guess we'll find out here over the next 3 to 4 months.
There are COVID dollars that have still remained in some instances. What is the position as far as unspent COVID dollars, and how much COVID money came to College Station?
Yeah, we had to have all those funds expended by last, I believe it was September 1. And I'm not sure on the total amount because I wasn't here and set that last year. And so it went on your number of free and reduced lunch students. So the higher number of students you've had, the more COVID money that you came. There's been some misconceptions put out that all the districts are struggling financially because they misspent their ESSER funds from the federal government. That's not true. You didn't get any new funding for 5 years from the state. So some of those dollars were actually having to supplant a lack of funding from the state. Some districts did put a lot of money into staffing positions, and it kind of bit them having to cut back. We had to cut back last year. I believe it was a little over $2 million in funding sources that COVID money had paid for that we had to take in on our books, and a lot of things that we stopped doing to save some money and move salaries around. So, it was supplanting a lack of effort from the state.
Everybody looks at their property tax bill at the end of the year, and you got the biggest number. You always do. School
Yes,
districts just do. We have this DOE situation that's going on in D.C. Everybody's trying to look at any institutional situation in that. Tell me what College Station is doing to find those dollars that could be spent in a different way.
Yeah, I think right now the way the legislator has funded Texas public schools forever, the property taxes that we have to pay, there's not another metric to get out. We heard Glenn Hager speak at the Bryan College Station Economic Summit here about a month ago, and the question was asked, how much would we have to increase the tax in order to get rid of property tax values? And I want to say it was like 52 cents on the dollar, something astronomical. So they can't be taken away. And so I think the issue has been the property taxes continue to rise because of property values. And that's the issue that we have right now of what the state says our property value should be with your local appraisal district. And if those numbers are not within a certain threshold, our funding as a school district could be cut. We have nothing to do with property values. We control property taxes, not property values. And I think there's a play on words. There's a bill right now, they want to increase the property value exemption, the homestead exemption from $100 now to $140,000. That's money that we don't generate anymore, that the state says they will fill in the gap. It's never filled in a dollar for a dollar. And I think there's homeowners don't understand the process. A lot of times they point at us that you're raising our taxes. We're not. That threshold is staying the same. When we went out for our bond election, we said worst case scenario, we would have a 2-cent tax rate increase. Our INS tax rate only increased by 1.2 pennies, and it won't move again. And, unless we do something later on in the future. But that's a number that our board has to approve, and we're in great shape financially that we didn't have to do any more than that.
Let's finish up with a couple of classroom situations. I think Louisiana just became a statewide ban on cell phones.
Yes, sir.
Texas is kind of a patchwork quilt. What are you hearing from your teachers, and what is your thought as far as cell phones in the classroom?
Yeah, we sent out a cell phone survey about 2 months ago, and so we got data back. I think there were a little over 2,600 people that responded. We surveyed students, parents, and teachers, and it was very interesting. I've figured, just watching districts that are getting more restrictive on it, felt like that there would be a pretty clear, hey, we want to support doing something more, and it wasn't. It was almost a 50-50 split. Now, for kids, it's very clear. It's not a distraction. We don't use it for anything but schoolwork. They're smart enough to realize, I need to get data on the other side. But from our parent standpoint and from our teachers, it was really kind of 50-50. We have kind of more of a generic policy, and it's more campus-based and driven. Policies are only as good as the people that enact on them. And this year, our middle schools got more restrictive on their own. They made a decision to be more restrictive on phones. It's worked out very well for them. Our next step, our 2 high schools will put out a survey to their parents and their teachers and get some data back and decide if they want to tighten things up or leave it for teachers to control that metric. We're in a day and time where kids and parents, they want their kids to have a cell phone. They want to be able to get in touch with them. I understand that, but there are some distractions that I feel like are better left based on the input that we receive for our campuses to handle that versus us mandating something from central office.
Sure. Picking up on your word distractions, working conditions, no matter what your salary is, has something to do with job satisfaction as well.
Right.
Distractions in the classroom that don't make an efficient learning process. What tools are in place at College Station? Are you looking to change any of those to make sure that is the best possible environment for a teacher to be able to teach the class?
Yeah, I think, a lot of maintenance improvements that we're doing, we're changing roofs, HVAC units across the school district, renovating campuses, adding additions to create, changing lighting, LED lighting throughout campuses. All of those things create the learning environment that we want for kids, because it is extremely important. Walking into a jury classroom and old paint and, old desks, it does matter. It does. And we want our kids and teachers to have the best. One distraction that's been since COVID is discipline issues have really, and it's statewide. It's not here specifically, it's across the state. Superintendents that I talk to have had issues with discipline. And it kind of gets into a world where there's certain students with certain disabilities when it comes to behavior. We're not equipped as a school district to handle those challenges. And, we're not trying to place kids and move them, but sometimes we're not equipped. And I think, moving forward, the state needs to explore some potential schools for, more discipline control with people that are trained to be able to better support these students. And I think that's something we're going to need to look at moving forward.
Does that mean one per campus, one per school district, one per county?
I think what I would think the most logical would be a county, that you had a facility, and it's almost, I would reckon it to almost rehab, that you work with the child and your goal is to get them back into their home school if possible, because like I said, we're not necessarily equipped to handle every situation. Our special education staff does a wonderful job for us and does a great job working with kids, but there's certain disabilities and behaviors that are a distraction for the other 22 kids in the classroom, and we're not able to give them the support. I think it could be better support in other areas as well.
Okay. Anything else we didn't cover this morning?
I don't think there's a lot going on. It's a lot going on. This is the spring, so all of our sports are rocking and rolling. Both high schools have done outstanding this spring. We're ready to get started with some of our bond projects on the athletic end starting this summer. And, it's a great time to be in College Station ISD. And, regardless of what happens in Austin, I tell our team all the time, our job is to control what takes place in our school district, and we're blessed to have the support of our community, and we want to continue to have a wonderful product.
Tim Harkrider, he's the superintendent of schools. Thanks for the time today.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Scott.